Good morning! As I was checking the bin, I have stumbled across this old portable vacuum cleaner, and I thought that I would give it a shot. We will see why the user threw it away in part 2 of the video series. Therefore, today, we will turn this scrap vacuum cleaner and its components into something really cool.
I got that
So I start off by removing all the screws inside the vacuum cleaner so that I can get access to the inside, and this means that I can get access to the components, which include the batteries and the motor. And basically, I can still theoretically charge it by using some alligator clips, but this was useless since actually it was the power supply, which supplies 13.5 volt and 400 milliamps, which is broken. We will try to fix it or to replace it in part 2. The fact that we have this switch is also going to be very useful, and we are going to unsolder it later in order to have it in our hands to control the skateboard. So now that we can turn this into something pretty cool, I have spent roughly 5 minutes designing the actual skateboard on a piece of paper with the measurements. And basically, I was trying to make it out of scrap components and pieces of wood that I have found around the trash and that are in my room, so this is why the skateboard will have such a weird design. But trust me, it will work in the end. Therefore, I can now gather all of my components, and I can now start by removing the wheels of this baby bike by removing the nuts and bolts with the help of Allen keys. I also had to remove the screws on this piece of wood in order to get some proper wood for the project. But I only do so after having drawn the measurements on my pieces of wood, and then this will allow me to cut them with the help of a saw. I did also have to drill a hole through the two pieces of wood so that I can pass a PVC pipe through it, which will act as an axle so that we can turn on the skateboard. And therefore I can cut a small piece of PVC pipe, but I also need to cut other pieces which have a bigger diameter. As I very often say in my videos, using a mandrel for PVC is much faster and much less tedious in order to cut the pieces of PVC. As you can note, I did not glue my PVC shims yet because we are not done working with the pieces of wood. We will do this at the very end of the project. Moreover, my battery connectors stand out from the bottom of the battery, thus I am cutting a small piece of wood which will act as a spacer and which will allow me to stick the battery onto the wood. I had to open the battery pack and then to drill a hole through the plastic in order to drive in a screw from the bottom, which will allow me to stick the electronics and the motor to the piece of wood and then the bigger piece of wood. Be careful when working around batteries, especially if they are lithium ions, because these are quite dangerous and sometimes tend to explode if they are in a short circuit or mishandled, so be very careful. And you might have to remove the connectors on the charging ports in order to get a better workspace in order to drive your screws in. After having jotted down where I will want the wheels to be, I then driving the screws and the motor is stuck onto the body. And moreover, I have found that the small piece of plastic which holds the motor is not that sturdy at all and thus that the motor can move around. So I have made this quick, dirt cheap cardboard spacer which will go in between the motor and then allow it to support my weight safely. Moreover, we will need to attach the wheel onto the motor, so I pre-melt the hole with an old soldering iron and I then pre-drive in my screws, which I will then drive in onto the vacuum blade part of the motor. And here we have a nice working mount, which is really sturdy. But then we will also need another wheel onto the rear part of the skateboard, so here I have drawn out an L bracket that I have gotten out of plywood. and the small triangles are used in order to make my bracket perpendicular and much stronger. Moving on, I am now drilling through the piece of wood so that I can then pass through the bolt and the nut which came with the baby bike. But first I will need to set up the L bracket itself by drilling in some screws. That was pretty long, but it ended up working great. Also, don't forget to add a small washer when placing the bolt and nut between the wheel, otherwise the wheel will not be able to roll smoothly. And so, now that I see that everything is in place, I can say that the rear part of the skateboard seems to be finished. Now we can move on to the front part. So I have found that the front forward wheels actually have bearing inside them, and so I am heading to the hardware store so that I can buy some L brackets which will allow me to mount the wheels onto the front piece of wood. If you have been following my channel for quite a while already, you might have seen that I had made a review video and unboxing video of this electric skateboard, and I said that I was going to give my feedback about a month later. And here 4 months have passed already, and overall it still works really great. I have had some issues with the wiring, so I had to open the whole board and rewire the skateboard, but it was fine because it was not that hard and I learned a lot during the process. Actually, the so said 12 kilometers off range is true, but after 6 kilometers the board starts getting really slow, and thus it is not that fast and that useful. And also, one thing that I have noted is that when you take your board after a full charge, then in some hills and when you start going really fast, the brake might stop working, and thus you are going to end up in a pretty hectic situation. But still, I think that it is a great product.